our country united in responding to this act of savagery rather than simply blame President Reagan for what the terrorist has done. Today, however, my colleagues seek to blame the Biden administration for the cowardly ISIS terror attack at Kabul airport in Afghanistan, which stole the lives of 13 American heroes in the final days of the Afghan war. This is not just morally confused and politically cynical, but historically disoriented. More than 2 decades long, the Afghan war was America's longest war. It spanned 4 Republican and Democratic presidential administrations. Joe Biden was president during 7 of the 238 months of the war, or to put it another way, for about 3% of the duration of the war, compared to roughly 20% for Donald Trump, 40% for Barack Obama, and 37% for George W. Bush. The Afghan war cost the lives of more than 2,400 American service members, 3,846 private contractors, more than 1,100 allied service members, more than 66,000 national Afghan military and police, and 47,245 Afghan civilians, without even getting into the Taliban side. Understanding what led to the collapse of the Afghan government and security forces is vitally important, but it requires looking comprehensively at the dynamics of the massive decades-long military and nation-building failure, not just the last few months of the war. This hearing's absurdly narrow focus is like trying to explain why the Confederacy lost the Civil War by examining only what happened at the surrender of Appomattox. Today's witnesses have the expertise to explain the structural factors behind the collapse of the Afghan government. John Sopko, the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction since 2012, repeatedly warned for years that the U.S. lacked a coherent strategy and had not defined its purposes, had set unrealistic expectations for its reconstruction mission in Afghanistan, did not properly understand Afghan political culture and institutions, and never faced the corruption of the Afghan government. In 2019, Sopko issued a report warning not just of risks created by the ongoing reconstruction effort, but also of risks arising from the Trump administration's ongoing efforts to negotiate a settlement directly with the Taliban. And when we zero in on the final months of the war, my Republican colleagues refuse to examine the elephant on the battlefield, President Trump's disastrous decision to cut out the Afghan government and negotiate directly with the Taliban, and then to enter into a dangerously lopsided agreement with these authoritarian religious fanatics. In the Trump-Taliban agreement, or Doha agreement, Trump struck numerous bad deals and fateful bargains with the Taliban that would come back to haunt us, including the release of 5,000 Taliban fighters from prison, many of whom promptly rejoined the insurgents in their battle to recapture Kabul. Our colleagues have also conveniently ignored President Trump's decision just 4 days after Joe Biden was declared the winner of the presidential election to secretly order the withdrawal of all troops by January 15, 2021, a move that stunned his own military generals, in which Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, called, quote, odd, not standard, and potentially dangerous. After significant pushback, President Trump rescinded his secret order and replaced it with the directive to draw down to 2,500 troops. Months later, when President Trump begrudgingly left Washington under a cloud of bear mace and tear gas, he did so without providing the new administration any plans at all on how to safely withdraw the remaining U.S. troops or how to safely evacuate Americans and our Afghan allies within the strict timeline prescribed by Trump's Taliban agreement. This failure was not an accident, but was calculated to force Biden's hand. President Trump later bragged about this maneuver at a rally with his supporters, stating, I started the process. All the troops are coming back home. They could not stop the process. They wanted to, but it was very tough to stop the process. Trump moved forward with the withdrawal of U.S. troops even as the Taliban increased violent attacks against the Afghan government and refused to sever ties with terrorist groups, including the Haqqani Network and al-Qaeda. When President Biden took office in January 2021, he faced the difficult choice: send more American troops back into Afghanistan to defend against the newly revitalized Taliban onslaught, in the 20-year civil war, or proceed with a full withdrawal from Afghanistan as contemplated by the Trump-Taliban agreement. After extensive consultation, including with his top national security advisors and intelligence personnel, on April 14, Biden announced that the final withdrawal of all U.S. troops from Afghanistan would begin on May 1st and be completed by September 11, 2021. Biden's decision to follow through on the Trump-Taliban agreement was not without risk, despite careful planning and a consensus from the intelligence community and military leadership on the Afghan military's ability to protect Kabul and defend against the Taliban after withdrawal. The Afghan government and security forces almost immediately collapsed, far more quickly than expected, forcing the administration to evacuate more than 120,000 Americans and Afghan nationals within 2 weeks in what became the largest non-combatant evacuation operation airlift in the history of the United States. Tragically, 13 American service members lost their lives during this heroic operation, and we as a nation are forever indebted to them and all of the more than 2,400 service members killed during the 20-year war for their commitment to America and also to the people of Afghanistan. Today, it's imperative that we put partisan politics aside to ensure that the suffering Afghan people continue to experience today, that these people will receive much-needed humanitarian and diplomatic assistance. Let's work together to find ways to support funding for programs that uplift Afghan women and girls in light of increasing violent repression against them. I applaud the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to delivering aid to the Afghan people while continuing to isolate and condemn the repressive and barbaric Taliban regime. Our country's essential position as a champion for democracy, human rights, and freedom